Welcome to Liberation Lens, where stories unfold beyond the headlines and perspective truly matters. History isn't finished, it's unfolding. This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters.
This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters. In today's episode, our focus is Taiwan. In the narrow waters of the Taiwan Strait, a global drama unfolds, one that spans centuries of colonization, war, displacement, and empire. But the story the world is told is deceptively simple. It's pointing to a rising authoritarian China versus a democratic, vulnerable Taiwan. Taiwan presents as a lone island, protected by the distant hand of American freedom. But when you dig deeper, the narrative cracks. Why is a nation over 12,000 kilometers away from Taiwan at the center of this regional tension? What justifies the world's most powerful military inserting itself into a dispute so far from home? And who truly benefits from this endless state of strategic ambiguity? Ladies and gentlemen, Taiwan is more than a pawn in a Cold War rerun. It is a contested legacy of imperialism, civil war, and global capitalism. China sees Taiwan as its unfinished revolution. The United States sees it as a cornerstone in a new Indo-Pacific containment strategy, a NATO-style bulwark against communism, cloaked in the language of human rights and democracy. But at its core, it seems pretty clear that this conflict is not just about territory. It's about hegemony. It's about which system, capitalist or socialist, unipolar or multipolar, will shape the future of the 21st century. And it's about whether peace will be determined by the interests of sovereign peoples, or by the calculus of empire. Dear listeners, today, we unpack the geopolitical machinery behind the Taiwan crisis. We look at its colonial past, America's military-industrial interests, China's historical claims, and the invisible hand of global capital that fuels it all. Stay with us, because what's happening in Taiwan is not an isolated struggle. It is a mirror reflecting the deeper question of our age. Who gets to shape the world, and on whose terms? This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters. Let's begin with this vague question. What is Taiwan? If you didn't know, Taiwan, otherwise known as the Republic of China, is an island separated by just 180 kilometers from mainland China. Note that it emerged from mainland China following a civil war, the Chinese Civil War. After losing the Civil War in 1949, the Republic of China government retreated to Taiwan and re-established itself as a de facto sovereign state. This is how Taiwan came about. Note that it is not officially recognized by the United Nations. As of 2025, only 12 countries officially recognize Taiwan, also known as the Republic of China, as a sovereign state with formal diplomatic relations. These countries are mostly small nations in Central America, the Caribbean, the Pacific, and the Vatican City. Note, therefore, that the Vatican City is the only European state maintaining full diplomatic ties with Taiwan. It is also worth noting that most countries, including the United States, Japan, and European Union members, do not officially recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state. But despite limited recognition, Taiwan operates as a de facto independent country with its own government, military, and democratic institutions. Besides, they maintain unofficial relations through trade offices and cultural exchanges, even with countries that do not officially recognize them as a sovereign state. Are you surprised? I hope not. Let's ride on. Mainland China, the People's Republic of China, on the other hand, was established in 1949, after the Communist Party won the Chinese Civil. It is recognized by the United Nations and most countries as the sole legal government of China. Based on its official recognition, the One China policy, promoted by the People's Republic of China, pressures countries to choose between diplomatic ties with Beijing or Taipei, not both. Note that Taipei is the capital of the Republic of China, also known as Taiwan. Is it now clear that the losers in the Chinese Civil War retreated from mainland China and formed a government in Taiwan? In 2021, scholar Richard Bush explained that Taiwan walks a tightrope, balancing internal aspirations for global legitimacy against the strategic interests of great powers. In his book Difficult Choices, Taiwan's Quest for Security and the Good Life, Bush maintains that the island is autonomous, but the price of that autonomy is global ambiguity. Whatever the situation, the next question to ask is, who has Taiwan belonged to historically? The territory, that is the island known as Taiwan, has a story that is layered and transnational. Remember that the territory is now inhabited since 1949 by breakaway Chinese who lost in the Chinese Civil War. And that they were those who administered China as the Republic of China. When they lost the Civil War to the Communist Party which now administers China as the People's Republic of China, they retreated to Taiwan with their followers. There, they re-established and continued with their administration as the Republic of China. Yes, that's it. So, let's look back at the territory, the island, Taiwan. It was first touched by the Dutch and Spanish in the 1600s. Then, it was later annexed by the Chinese Qing dynasty in 1683. Then came Japan. Japan ruled the island from 1895 until its defeat in World War II. Now, get greater insights. After 1945, Taiwan was returned to Chinese control, but the Chinese Civil War changed everything. When Mao's Communist Party took Beijing in 1949, Chiang Kai-shek's defeated nationalist forces fled to Taiwan. There, they continued as the Republic of China. They established themselves as a Cold War ally of the United States, and as an enemy of Communist China. This means that, as Ukraine is to Russia, Taiwan is potentially America's or NATO's window into mainland China. Any attempt at installing a US base in Taiwan would trigger the same effects we are currently witnessing in Ukraine with NATO support. For this reason, historian Denny Roy, in 2003, likened Taiwan to a geopolitical pawn in a post-colonial Cold War chess game. So, given these insights, what do you think is China's stake in Taiwan, its territory, regained from Japan in 1945? To China, Taiwan is not up for negotiation. The One China policy is non-negotiable. Beijing insists that Taiwan is a breakaway province, and any move toward independence is a red line. From the Chinese perspective, it's not just sovereignty. It's about national pride, historical memory, and the Communist Party's legitimacy. Relative to this, scholar Andrew Nathan, in 2017, portrayed the situation in the following words, and I quote, "Taiwan's independence would signal not just a territorial loss, but a failure of the Chinese state to fulfill its nationalist promise." Note that Taiwan's strategic location in the first island chain also makes it central to China's maritime security. So, how would you consider America's stake in Taiwan? What does America want in Taiwan? Washington's interest in Taiwan isn't just about supporting Western democracy. Besides that, is the socio-economic dimension. The tech dimension appears really strong here. Taiwan's TSMC produces over 60% of global semiconductors. This is critical to everything from iPhones to fighter jets. According to Hal Brand's book title, American Grand Strategy in the Age of Trump, published in 2018, if China controls Taiwan, it would gain a chokehold on the world's digital lifeblood. Besides, Brand acknowledges that while U.S. foreign policy has often appeared chaotic, it has generally followed a coherent grand strategy. He claims that though it seems chaotic in nature, the U.S. foreign policy maintains a liberal international order that benefits American interests. Brand further argues that this strategy, though imperfect, has been remarkably successful since World War II. Therefore, given America's military and economic interests in Asia, the same strategy should be maintained. Taiwan, in this case, could be used as a linchpin of the liberal international order in Asia to counter China's military and economic strategy in favor of America. Accordingly, in their article titled, How America Can Shore Up Asian Order, published in Foreign Affairs, in 2021, Campbell and Doshi opine that America's Indo-Pacific vision hinges on keeping China boxed in, and that Taiwan is the perfect fulcrum. They argue that the US must restore balance and legitimacy in the Indo-Pacific to counter China's challenge to the regional order. They draw lessons from 19th-century European diplomacy, particularly the post-Napoleonic Long Peace, to suggest that regional stability requires both power equilibrium and perceived legitimacy. These, they summarized under three strategic pillars. Balance of power is the first. Under this, they advise that the US should maintain a strong forward presence and deepen military cooperation with allies to deter coercion. Secondly, they impress on legitimacy of order. They stress that Washington must support an order that regional states see as fair, not just one that serves US interests. Thirdly, they advocate for allied coalition. They argue that a network of like-minded partners is essential to uphold rules-based norms and resist authoritarian revisionism. Their article helped shape the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. Campbell later became the White House Indo-Pacific coordinator, and Doshi served on the National Security Council. This means that their ideas weren't just theoretical, they were policy-shaping. Would you then conclude, with these, that America's involvement in Taiwan is altruistic? If no, does China have a right to deter US interests in Taiwan? Under international law, China asserts its right to defend sovereignty and deter foreign military presence near its borders. Article 2.4 of the UN Charter prohibits external threats to territorial integrity. Are you aware that the US officially recognizes Beijing's One China policy since 1979? Are you aware that despite that, the US maintains unofficial ties with Taiwan, supplying to them weapons and intelligence? How would you describe that? Is this attitude of strategic ambiguity not creating a situation of dangerous instability? To this, scholar Susan Shirk warned in 2007 that, the US walks a fine line between defending democracy and provoking confrontation. So, does China have a right to push back against American influence? Yes, but not with force. Unfortunately, neither side has demonstrated a commitment to diplomacy over domination. So, what can be done to achieve lasting peace and security, and avoid tension and escalations in the near or distant future? This conflict need not end in war. But that requires creativity, courage, and compromise. Bonnie Glaser in 2020 argued for a multilateral peace mechanism, one that includes ASEAN, Japan, South Korea, and neutral mediators. John Eikenberry in 2021 proposed a broader framework of liberal internationalism that prioritizes coexistence over coercion. His solutions include mutual demilitarization zones, a new Taiwan Strait Accord, international arbitration via the ICJ, and economic cooperation over containment. The time for gunboat diplomacy is over. A new architecture of peace is possible. That is, if power yields to principle. Ladies and gentlemen, what is your say? What would you say is Taiwan? A nation, a province, a flashpoint, or a projection screen for global anxieties? Have you noticed that the answer depends not on the people of Taiwan alone, but on the interests of empires and the legacies they seek to preserve? Have you noticed that America's presence in Taiwan is not altruism, but a strategy, an echo of NATO's old script, adapted for the Pacific theater? That her presence is a pivot not just toward Asia, but toward preserving dominance in a world that is tilting, slowly but surely, toward multipolarity. Would you now want to believe that China, for all its contradictions, holds its claim to Taiwan as central to its national dignity and territorial integrity? And that the tools it may use to achieve this, coercion, propaganda, militarization, mirror the very imperial forces it claims to resist? Would you now say that for these reasons, Taiwan has become the battleground not just of missiles and trade routes, but of narratives, ideologies, and futures? The truth is, the international community is not neutral. It is fractured, selective, and often silent when power speaks through bombs and sanctions. It praises sovereignty, but punishes those who seek it outside the frameworks of Western approval. That is the hypocrisy of our age. That is the DNA of global geopolitics. But it doesn't have to be the end of the story. This is Liberation Lens. Perspective matters. We see through the fog of empire. We question the puppeteers behind the pageantry of peace. And we amplify the voices drowned out by tanks, treaties, and televised lies. Because real peace doesn't come from power projection. It comes from self-determination, mutual respect, and the courage to dismantle the systems that thrive on division and domination. The strait may be narrow, but the implications are vast. Let's not just watch history unfold. Let's interrogate it. Let's rewrite it.
You have just seen the world through a different lens. Subscribe, comment, share, and help amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Until next time, keep looking deeper. Liberation Lens. Perspective matters.